Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be where you are out there. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is Fritz, and today this is C# with CSharpFritz. It's sunny outside. Look at it. It's beautiful outside. It's beautiful. And we're going to be talking about ASP.NET Core today. Of course, this is our beginner-friendly stream, talking all about ASP.NET Core, answering your questions. We are very AMA focused. Ask me anything, but we're going to stay very focused on the topic. We're not going to go strut off on too far into the weeds. We don't want to get too advanced. There's other folks, of course, that are much more better equipped to answer those in-depth advanced questions. But we want to make sure that beginners are welcome, that you can come in, you can ask your questions, and get started with building web applications using .NET. And today, like I said, we're talking about authentication and authorization. How we doing there, chat room? Let's take a look over here. Where'd the chat go? Where did chat go? I know where chat went. I know where it went. Let me go find it. I know where it is. There it is. Hello. Good to see you. Let me say hello to some folks that are hanging out over here. Shy Sharp is here. Robert Dino, is that Fabers Atachi? Hello. Lumholt, how's it going? Ben Dover, welcome. Dukasoft is here. The Pitho, hello. What? Ryu Cuckoo, okay. Hello, welcome in. Yes, I will be streaming tomorrow over on my channel. Leet Geek, good morning to you. It's snowing where you are? It's been snowing here. We got another 3 inches last night. We had a good 1.5 feet last week. So here, just outside of Philadelphia, we are we're dealing with a lot of snow. We've got a little bit coming through here. Is that Dryes? Welcome. Good afternoon. How you doing there? Q Macro 99. Hey, good to see you, Q Macro. Hello. So I struggled with where to jump in, where to start with this topic. We've been building towards different features of the web framework, the ASP.NET Core framework that you can use with .NET 5, free and open source, works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And I've been building towards this topic, and I've been, well, not just this topic. I guess we're building towards the hosting topic, which is in the next 2 weeks. But we've been touching and going into how to build web interface, how to build APIs, how to build components that you can reuse, and showing how some of those things work. Razor pages, MVC, going through all these different topics. We did entity framework some time ago, and now we need to talk about, well, let's dial in authentication. Let's make authentication, authorization, a thing inside of our applications. And the struggle that I have with this is there are so many different services, configurations, things that you can bring into the mix. Whether it's B2C with your favorite cloud provider, it's OpenID with one of your favorite services, Twitter, Facebook, Microsoft account, LinkedIn, whatever. There's, well, how you store it. Do you want to use local Azure Active Directory? Do you want to use Active Directory? Do you want to use Azure Active Directory? Do you want to use other identity services that are available out there? Do you want to store your data locally in a database? All kinds of different ways that you can configure and run this. And I could literally spend weeks covering all of these different topics. And then it struck me, we have another channel here, the 425 show, that does cover a lot of these things. So I want to get you in just enough that you see here's how to connect and where the authentication pieces happen inside of ASP.NET Core. And there's plugins that happen appropriately for all those other services and things. And coming in from the other side, I'm going to set up authorization. And there's plugins and things that go out to all kinds of other services that those folks on those shows, they do a really nice job describing and getting into. But I want to show you how you can interact with them from your web application. Prevent folks from accessing different parts of your application if they're not logged in, if they're not a member of the appropriate role. Let's talk a little bit about claims. Let's talk a little bit about different data that we want to store and manage about our users. And I think that's where we're going to end up going today. So, hey Manoj, good to see you. HGS and Hagen missed the last session. So with the snow, there were a couple of other things going on here. You might hear I have some construction going on the house, and they're actually working on the lower floor right behind me. So that's why I'm on this microphone today, so that hopefully you don't hear all the hammering and banging going on from the construction work. So in my testing before we got started here, I think I've got it tuned pretty well. Through all that, I haven't uploaded the last session yet to YouTube. We will get that loaded later today, tomorrow, and then this video will be loaded out to YouTube as well. How's it going there, Ancient Coder? Hello, hello. So let me get some music playing here in the background. This is, of course, Harris Heller, and I've been picking off his Stream Beats playlists. These are playlists assembled by folks in the community from various albums that he's put together of these Stream Beats. These are free, royalty-free songs that you can listen to on YouTube, on Twitch. They're DMCA free. You're not going to be chased down by the recording industry. It's free for you to listen to on Spotify, on Apple Music, wherever you listen to music on the internet. And this is the lo-fi playlist today that we're going to be listening to, just to have a little bit of music in the background as we're writing code, as we're having some fun together, learning and going through the topic here today. Let me get my glasses on here. There we go. One of your favorite subjects, authentication and authorization. You know what? There's a couple topics around this that I struggle with. It's authentication and authorization for the most part. When I'm working with it, it's set it and forget it. I add it once into my application. I do the configuration in one place, and then I'm done. I can reference it. I can set up my policies, make sure that you need to be logged in to access these certain web pages. I can properly check to make sure, hey, do you have this access to see this data on page, and show and hide that. But after that, I don't spend too much time configuring and reconfiguring this. So some of those topics, it's one of those things that I do but once every few years even. So I had to go back. I had to dig into the notebooks, the notes here, and go make sure I remembered how to do that. Put together some notes so that we were ready to go here. Rick, Lycan, and Lex Stoicus. Nah, don't have a music command hooked up today. This is Stream Beats. This is the lo-fi playlist with songs from the Gold, White, and Inu albums, among others. Nico, there's a handful of albums that are in this playlist that are all kind of stitched together so that we have some groovy background music here as we're writing code together today. I'm a little bit loud there. There we go. Yeah, wrong channel. That's my channel that we do music, but not today. All right. So let's get into this a little bit. Of course, we have there's a GitHub repository out here. Let me head over to the code, and we can start taking a look at what's ahead, what's on deck for us here. Here we go. So this is the C# with CSharpFritz repository. I still haven't published this stuff from last week. That's what we got to get. We got to get that updated. And I got overwhelmed with a handful of things last week. So I promise you we'll get that done and delivered. So there's the link out to this. You can find all the samples out here, and I have some updates that I need to publish, like I said, for last week's, and we'll publish this week's when we're done today's session. But we're talking about ASP.NET. It was labeled ASP.NET Security, but we're talking about authentication and authorization today. Coming up in the weeks ahead, we're going to talk about microservices with Docker and Kubernetes next week. Deploying ASP.NET Core to Azure. we're going to be talking about, I think that's probably going to be our last topic of the month. I think I want to move that down maybe to the end here. And perhaps we do these two next week. Actually, next week is a holiday, isn't it? Is it next week or the week after? We have another holiday in here. But background hosted services and cores, the ability to run processes behind the scenes inside your ASP.NET Core application. That's what background services is. Cores, of course, cross-origin resource sharing. This is a way for you to prevent some of your APIs from being contacted outside of the domains, outside of the locations that you want it to be requested. And to protect also that users that are navigating, interacting with their applications, they aren't getting that cross-site scripting attack where they're trying to interact with something over here and they're pulling something from somewhere else and they don't know it. So we're going to be talking about that. And like I said, I want to wrap up the month with deploy ASP.NET Core to Azure and talk about Azure App Service, talk about deploying and running with a container on Azure. There was a request to talk about Project Tie. I might touch on it in that session, ever so briefly, to show how that can be used. So Project Tie is experimental. It's still something we're working on, but it's something that I think we can show off in either the Docker Kubernetes show, or I think deployed to Azure might be the right place to do it. So that's what's coming up in the weeks ahead. You can see this out on the GitHub repository, and we'll continue to update this. I need to set up for the next project. Starting in March, we're going to be talking about Blazor. That was our next requested topic. Was let's do a series on Blazor. So I'm not sure if it'll be 2 months or 3 months. I got to plan out what the curriculum looks like, but we'll have as our next series. It'll be 8 to 12 episodes all about getting started building with Blazor. And we'll talk about Blazor server side, as well as Blazor WebAssembly, how to build progressive web applications with Blazor, how to build components, all kinds of topics to make sure that you understand this user interface framework that we're really excited about. I believe the topic after that was mobile, Xamarin. So that sets us up for early summer, talking about building for Android, building for iPhone with C#. So that's actually a topic that I'm personally a little bit weak in, and this gives me actually an opportunity to go study up and make sure that I'm in the right place to be able to present and teach you. So I'm looking forward to that because I think it's good to always be learning something new in this industry. The only constant in technology is change. My college professor hammered that into us. The only constant in technology is change. Everything's constantly changing. If you're not learning something, you're going to get stagnant. You're going to fall behind. So that's something coming up. Gaududis asks, how do you spell it? Project Tie is what... There you go. There it is in the chat from the Visual Studio. I typed it into the wrong chat. Let me see here. Rick asks a question here. Will I be doing authentication by implementing it myself by using Easy Auth when deploying to Azure? I'm not even deploying to Azure here. I'm showing how ASP.NET Core supports authentication. And I'm going to do that, you'll see here in a minute, with the local authentication configuration. So, not going to get into deployment and all the various services. It's way too much. Oh, you covered this, but I know about scenario that. Not even touching it. Not even going it, because I want to be able to give folks a series of samples where you can download and, okay, it's authenticating into a little SQL-like database, which is not appropriate for production. But for the purposes of understanding how the authentication works inside ASP.NET Core, it'll get you there. It has that storage. Walter has a question here. Let's bring this one up. If you use the authentication built into AspNet Core for a web application built for Azure deployment, do you get two-step authentication as an option? Is there an extra cost involved? No extra cost involved. You can add two-factor authentication to any AspNet Core application, right? Using an Authenticator app, right? That time-based one-time token that you get. That's something that you can add into an application. I didn't have it in my list of notes for today, but I can dig it up and we can add that into the sample. I forget the exact configuration that you have to go through there, but let me write that down, and we can get into we can touch on that today. So, hey there, Rambling Geek. Good to see you. PC Nerd, welcome in. Do you need to pay mobile providers for the SMS? Well, if you were doing text-based, we do not recommend folks use text-based authentication, two-factor authentication. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. We do not recommend that because if somebody is trying to hack into you, they can get past the SMS. So, Jedi Mega Man, hello. Yeah, use an authentication app. Those are free, easy to use, and you don't have to pay anybody to transmit data around. All right. Let's get into this. Let's talk about building adding authentication to our AspNet Core applications. Now, there are templates available that'll get you started, that'll add in authentication and authorization into a brand new application. I've already created one, and I'll show you the steps to go through there, and I'll show you the documentation to get into it, to get started here, and there'll be links in the show notes. Caparino has a question here. Let me pin this question. What does an authenticator app means? You get authorization code from an Android app. Let me come back to that. There are authenticator apps. There's a Microsoft Authenticator app. There's a Google Authenticator app that you can download from the app stores for your phone that will generate these 6-digit codes. But we'll talk more about that when we get to two-factor authentication. So, and yeah, sounds like that's a topic we want to get to. Is that Jorge 19 asks, is identity recommended for all the authentication stuff? So this is what we're showing today. We're showing AspNet Core Identity. Now, this is someplace where the marketing folks in their infinite wisdom named multiple products Identity, and it confuses the heck out of people because they'll say, oh yeah, I'm using Identity. Well, is that Microsoft Identity? Is that AspNet Identity? Is that B2C Identity? Is that your Microsoft? What identity are you using? We're going to be using AspNet Core Identity today and showing how that works. You've seen a lot of docs using that, but I saw that free service. So the Microsoft Identity, not talking about that. Talk to the folks on the 425 show, because once you have AspNet Core, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're talking about AspNet Core authentication and authorization today. Let's break that down. Authentication is when you want to log in to an application. Make sure that you are who you say you are. I'm logging in as Jeff Fritz. I have this password. I'm authenticated as Jeff Fritz. Authorization is Jeff Fritz an administrator of this website? Does Jeff have permission to access this application? We know who Jeff is. Is he allowed to do these things? That's authorization. So you can't have authorization unless you have authentication. So we need to know who you are, so that we can turn around and say, is this person allowed to access this resource? Excuse me. So that's where we're going. That's where we're going today. So there are some third-party services, and it's phenomenal. There's a great ecosystem of third-party services like Identity that Jorge mentions here. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And those plug in nicely with ASP.NET Core. There's a handful of folks you can use their services. Folks like Auth0 and Okta. There's Identity Server out there you can use as well. And some of the folks on these streams have spent hours showing how to use just those services. I want to show you how to use the framework. So, and there's a question here. Which is better for traditional web applications, cookies or tokens? So, you need a little bit more context around that. But for ASP.NET Core applications, where we're rendering HTML on the server and sending it down to a browser, cookies are a preferred way to go, simple way to go. You can certainly use tokens, especially if you're interacting with APIs and you want to be able to pass that JSON web token around so that we maintain your authentication to the various services. But we're going to be talking about cookies today and going through that because it's pretty easy to understand and get the concepts across. Once you understand how to work with the cookies inside the application, then we can move on and start looking at scaling up and using more advanced features. So, but for right now, we're going to be using cookies. All right, this is a basics discussion. So, let's talk about where did it go? I already lost my page. Over here. We're talking about identity in ASP.NET Core, and by default, when you start a new application, it doesn't necessarily come with identity. There are templates to get it in the box and running, and you can run them at the command line to get those get that configuration loaded in. We're using individual configuration. This means that you're going to be creating a user ID with a password, saving it locally in a database, right? We'll assign roles, we'll assign claims to that user and pass it around our application. Now, you didn't know there were switches you could pass into templates. So you can say .NET New Web App --auth, and you can specify, we're specifying the individual identity configuration and output into the web app 1 folder. And you can tell it that you want to run with SQLite, you want to run with local DB. I built a sample that I want to make sure that everybody can use, even if you don't have SQL Server and local DB installed. So I built this with SQLite, so we can browse into our database and see what that looks like. So I have my SQLite browser here. We'll get in and look at our database in just a minute here. So I've got my database browser available. Now, what are the things this gives me out of the box? What does this do that's different inside of this application? And I've already scaffolded out some of the identity things that are inside this. So some of this is a little bit different, and I'll talk through that and show you what those changes are. So let's comment this for right now. Yeah. And we'll close that. Good. I'm going to close that for right now. So what it gives you by default is this block right here. It adds into configure services this additional configuration for where to go and get security data. Where does this data live? How do we connect? And how do we save information out? So what's going on here is it sets up a database context, application DB context. So just like we saw in our entity framework discussion, there's a database context. and it lives over here, and there it is. Now, different from what we saw when we talked about Entity Framework, instead of this inheriting from DB context, it's inheriting from identity DB context. This version, I'm looking at the pseudo data here, has all the information needed in order to connect and generate and work with identity concerns. The things for users, roles, claims, and all the associations that go back and forth between them. Because ASP.NET Core Identity isn't just, oh, let's let folks authenticate. Oh, let's check and see if somebody has this permission. It is a full suite of security capabilities that includes registration, login, notification services, like email services, so that all the things you need to provide and to provide that security interaction for your application, right? To secure as far as authentication and authorization, all of those user interfaces, services, APIs, data stores, those are all available as part of identity. So Identity DB context creates by default all those things and puts them in the database. Now, I'll show you what's in the database in just a second, but this is what we get by default. The database, let me open my little SQL database here. I thought I already had it open. Do I have it? Yeah, there it is. So, can this zoom? Can I zoom this? I don't think I can zoom this. Can we do this? Are we gonna get the zoom? Nope. Now I feel shame. It's really small up there. I have tables that are all called ASP.NET something. Okay, so there's ASP.NET roles, ASP.NET users, and I've also got ASP.NET user claims, ASP.NET role claims, ASP.NET user logins, ASP.NET user roles, ASP.NET user tokens. This is all the information that we need to pass around all of that authentication information and those claims, those roles that we're going to use later for authorization. Looking here. So there's a question about tokens versus cookies. Cookies can be used for APIs. Tokens can be used as well. But when you use tokens, and this is a little bit advanced, I don't want to get too far into this. Tokens can be used, they have to be embedded in a header. They don't get automatically sent back and forth like a cookie does when you interact with a server. So you can use cookies to authenticate to other APIs to signal R and pass information back and forth between those services. So, tokens, you have to take a couple extra steps so that you remember to put the token on the headers that you're passing back and forth. Samad Mohammed, you're learning about arrays in C#. Check out the rest of the YouTube playlist. Check out youtube.net, youtube.com/.net, and look for the C# with CSharpFritz playlist. There's 15, 16 videos out there. Each one's 2 hours long that'll help you go. Yeah, I don't want to go too deep into authentication and all the different things here. I want to get you to the point of you're authenticating. You know how to get users logged in and where and how you plug those things in. Those other topics, take those over and we can talk to our friends on the 425 show and places like that. So, Application DB context, you saw some of the tables that it created, and they're always available for me inside this class. But there's a series of manager objects that work with this class that do things like encrypt passwords. Encrypt's the wrong word. Hash passwords that check to see and make sure that you have the appropriate roles, the appropriate claims that are associated with you. And it does all those joins and looks things up appropriately in this data store. So if we continue looking here. So that's the data store, and here it says it's using SQLite, and I have a default connection string, and that default connection string is sitting right there. Okay, so it's using just appdb. It's just a file sitting here locally right there. All right. So add database developer exception page filter. So if there's a problem interacting with the database, it'll give me an appropriate error message that we can trap and interact with. Add default identity, and I've got a custom user object here. There is, let me remove this. There is a default user called identity user you can use. Identity user basically has a username and an email address. Those are the bare minimum things that you need in order to work with a user. But, I'm sorry, it's also got a phone number. But it comes with two-factor authentication. It comes with the ability to say, are we locked out? Concurrency timestamps, so that we can make sure that it's properly updated. There's the email addresses, the username. Have they been locked out? How many times have they failed logging into this account? So we can trip that intruder detection lockout. All of this is built in. You don't have to worry about this. It's managed for you through some of the interfaces and manager objects that we have. Now, that's the identity user. I have a customized user that I created over here called Web App 1 User. So, if you want to add additional important information to your user object beyond just their email address, their phone number, and a login name, right? Email address and phone number are used in case we need to contact them, right? We need to send a notification. And even then, you need to wire up those notification providers with something like SendGrid or Twilio so that you can send those messages. But if I'm going to add somebody's name, right? I want to actually have their given name, surname inside their user account. I'm going to add a name field, and I'm going to add their date of birth, DOB. Okay, so I've got that information. But notice I'm using this attribute PersonalData. This is important that we understand this, and this is a great feature that has been provided to us by the ASP.NET Core team. Because there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of questions in today's web, in the web of 2021, around sharing of privacy information, personal data that you don't want to get out there. You want to be able to see, you want to be able to control. By putting the personal data tag on these two fields now are going to be made visible to anybody that wants to go back and look at their profile data. And it shows that this is personal data that we're capturing, we're managing, and there's privacy concerns around that. So that when you say, forget me from this application, and that's built in, these records get deleted appropriately. These fields are wiped and no longer made available. The Caparino's asking, so it's built in, not custom. The personal data attribute is built in. These two fields that I've added are custom. So, right, I mean, maybe there's personal data that's appropriate for your users. Maybe you work at a hair salon. You're building an application for users at a hair salon. So maybe I want to add a personal data that is a public string hair color. Maybe that's appropriate for your application to have that information with the user. That's not security critical information, but that's information that's important to know about the user. So maybe you can refer appropriate shampoos, conditioners, because you're running the website for a salon. Okay, that's appropriate. It's personal data. It's not something that we need to run the application. It's a nice to have. So, right, these are things that we need to keep track of, because there's also the concept of claims. We'll talk about claims when we get to authorization here in a few minutes. Now, all of the user interfaces by default for identity are shipped as part of what's called a Razor class library. It's a library that has all the user interface things wrapped up in it. And it's right here inside the references to our application. I've added all these other things so that we can generate and work and customize these, but you don't have to customize a thing just by adding those lines inside of startup over here to add a default identity. Just by adding those lines, it makes available, this thing makes available a default user interface so that folks can register, log in, and interact with your application in a secure way. Let's run the application and take a look at what that looks like. Let me grab a browser over here, and I'm going to go to localhost 5001. I'm going to go to HTTPS localhost 5001 because, of course, my application's secure. Default user interface. This is the default template. This is what you get. But I also now have register and log in. This login partial is available to us. This is a component that is added, and the template places right here that has those links and where to go in order to log in. So I can click register and it allows me to log in. Now, I added those two custom fields, full name and birth date, and I've added them into this file. So let me fill this out. Birth date, August 1st, 1990. That's right. I'm 32. Yeah, sure. 31. That's me. There's my email. It's keying in a very secure password. Very, very secure password. And register. Now, I've got a new user, and it says hello, because that's my username. By default, the email is the username, and it passes that around. There's ways to customize that. And that's fine. I can click on this hello statement, and these are some of the files, some of the interactions that you get by default with ASP.NET Core Identity. Now, right, there's my email, send verification email. You have to hook up an email sender service, something like SendGrid, or your own SMTP server, so it knows how to send those verification emails. By default, it doesn't know how to do this. Excuse me. I can change my password. I can set up two-factor authentication. And I can see my personal data here. Now, right, this is one of those privacy regulation things that is included here by default for you. And when I click download, you'll see I get a little JSON file that has all that personal information that relates to my user record. All right. So, not bad. That's right. I mean, this is a GUID. Who really cares about it? But I've got all of my personal information as a user configured here. Actually, wait. Yeah. All right. So that's something that I can work with. That's something that is easy for me to understand, and it provides the assurance to my organization that this personal data is being managed appropriately. Should an audit come through, should somebody challenge and say, hey, your privacy constraints here, your privacy regulations aren't appropriate, you're storing too much personal data. Well, we can go and tinker and move that stuff around, mark it as personal data, so it appears and gets managed appropriately over here. Minaj asks, let me grab this question. When you decorate a property with personal data, does it hash the data when it's stored in the database, or is it just stored as plain text? Let's take a look. So here's my ASP.NET users table. I will browse it, And you will see email, where'd it go? Username. If I keep scrolling over here, name, date of birth. They are not hashed. They are stored clear text here, so they can be fetched and interacted with. Right? If they were hashed, right, you'd have, just like a password, you'd have to hash it, and you can only see if the hash matches. You can't decrypt it and see if it matches. So, all right. Thank you for the question. So, these are all the things I get by default. Now, I went and added that name and date of birth field into the application. So, it scaffolds out this area called identity here, right? In ASP.NET Core, this isn't something that we talked about in any of our streams, but it's good to talk about now. You can create an area of related user interface functionality, and this one is called identity. This way, everything appears in the same structure. You can set up a same shared layout. You can set up a shared set of database models that you interact with, and it makes perfect sense to do that here. So, I've already defined, and I think, yeah, I don't need this. I got rid of that. So I've defined that user, and I have it sitting here as this is the user object that we work with in these pages that's being passed around to log in. But when you take a look at the pages ASP.NET Core generates for you, it's actually kind of impressive. All of these things that you get for free that you can then customize, scaffold out to disk, and customize as you see fit. So inside the registration page, we have, this is a Razor page, but it's got all the things that you would expect to see for registration, and they're laid out kind of nice for a default layout. You can certainly customize this as much as you'd like, but right, so there's the email, password, and confirm password fields. I just added a couple fields here for name and date of birth. Now, this uses a strong view model interaction. So if you scroll down here and you look at, right, this is the page model, the content, the C# that runs behind that CSHTML. You see there is a input model here called input, and that's what was being bound to us over here, input.name. So it's doing two-way binding. Things that are keyed in there into those properties, there we are, name, date of birth, email. It's being validated here using these component attributes. Full name is a required field. It's text, and we're going to display a label next to it of full name. DOB, well, we don't want to put DOB on the screen. We'll put birth date. And it kind of makes sense what you see. And further down, when it actually goes and we post back that user's information, it's going to, because it's two-way data bound into that input object, I can now say, well, go create a new user. Grab the name field, the date of birth field, the email for their username and their email here. I can change that username to something else if I want, right? Because maybe I don't want to log in with the email address, right? Jeff@jeffreyfritz.com. I want to log in with my CSharpFritz ID. I want my nickname to be my username. Well, here's where you can configure that. Makes sense. But for the purposes of something simple that folks understand and can kind of connect to, that's what's going on here. So when you start to customize this is when it becomes important to you, and you can do some more of these cool things. Keeping an eye on the chat room here. So this is pretty much boilerplate stuff. So we can go through here, and you can see after it's done, it'll call back and try and set up a confirmation email. We don't have the email configured on this system, so it just right after it succeeded, it routed right through this, tried to send an email. See, email sender, actually, the default email sender doesn't do anything. And yeah, it tries to say, confirm your email. Click this link to confirm your email. So register confirmation. So and then go and sign in. Skip through a bunch of these things, but what are these options that we have here? Because, right, there's how many different websites that you go to where folks will say, oh, your password needs to be 10 characters long, it needs an uppercase character, a lowercase character, it needs to have a symbol, it needs to have an emote, and it must include a it must include a Greek god's name. You know, all these funny things. No. You can configure that over here in Startup. Let me open up this bit, identity options. All of those rules about your passwords are configured here. Does it need to have a digit? Does it need to have lowercase characters? Non-alphanumeric, uppercase. How long does it have to be? You can't have the same character repeated. Huh? I think there's also some complexity requirements that you can add in here. No, I don't say it's not in this. In a previous version, there were complexity requirements that you could go through. Right, you could certainly add into the registration page over here when it receives and sets the password. Where is it? Here, right? You could have it do a check and say, well, is that password in the user's name, or is that password part of their email address? And you could reject right here and say, sorry, that's not valid. Kicked out. So all that stuff that you can add in here, all that stuff can be added in here. So your password policy is up to you, and you can configure it here in Startup. Lockout settings, right? That intruder detection lockout. How many times can people have a failed login attempt before they get locked out? You have these configuration options, options.lockout. So, and if you do get locked out, you're locked out for 5 minutes, right? If you're a new user, yeah, you can be locked out too. Usernames. What characters can we use in the username, right? There are some places that say, sorry, it cannot contain any special characters. Dashes, periods, underscores, right? But of course, if the username is an email address, you need some of these characters in there. But some places like Twitch, they do allow you to put some other characters in there, and they don't want you to use some of these characters. So, right, there's some give and take there, depending on how you want to store your user account. Your username will determine some of these characters that you can use. So, options user require unique email. So, can you register these multiple accounts to the same email address? So, by default, it's set to false. You can register multiple accounts to it. The Jibster, I don't mind answering that. And I'll grab this from Regathian and answer that. Why am I using Visual Studio Code? I thought Visual Studio was better for C# development. They both have the same C# and Razor editors available in them. So you actually get a great experience with both. It's up to you. By showing Visual Studio Code, this is an editor that everybody can use, everybody can download and work with, and there isn't any implicit gatekeeping by showing features that not everybody can get access to. So everybody can do this, everybody can get this highlighting and this type of interaction, and have a good experience, whether they're on Windows, Mac, or Linux. So I was doing a bit of this coding on my Linux laptop. Regathian has a question here. Is this compatible with Blazor? Yes. There's some different things you have to set up in Blazor in order to get it to connect, relay, and interact with the services appropriately. But that's specific to Blazor. We'll talk about that more when we get to Blazor. March, April, we'll be talking about security with Blazor. So, okay. So let's get into this. So that's how we can configure all the things around password, lockout, and user. And I showed you how I customized that a little bit. There was some questions about cookies. Oh gosh, how do you want to use cookies or tokens? Cookies have in ASP.NET Core set up for, and it makes sense. This is the way most websites authenticate and handle your interaction. It drops a token inside of a cookie, an HTTP cookie, that lives inside your browser. And just to make sure that everybody knows, a cookie is not chocolate chips or sugar or whatever. It's a key value pair that has an expiration time that lives inside your browser and is only made available to the website that placed it there. So they place a little bit of tracking information so that we know who you are while you're logged into the website. And we configure these little bits of information around the cookie so that folks know how to handle, well, if access was denied to something, the name of the cookie that lives in your browser, whether it's sent on HTTP or HTTPS secure connections, how long it lives in your browser. Hey, if you don't have the cookie, where do you log in at? /identity/account/login. And what's the name of the parameter to go back to the page that we were kicked out of because we weren't logged in? So, and then this one, sliding expiration. True. So sliding expiration means if you continue interacting with the website, this time span gets renewed and extended. So I continue to work with the website. I buy another hour of time that my cookie is valid. If I stop interacting with the website, that 60 minutes is counted off. And 60 minutes from the last time I interacted with the website, the cookie's no longer valid and you get kicked out. So I see a number of very advanced questions coming up in the chat room. Please, let's take it easy with those. If you want to ask further questions, if you want to talk about some of those other services, let's take them over to a Discord, and let's make sure that we leave some space for beginners to ask some questions, and for folks that are just learning this for the first time. Let's make sure that they have some space to talk here, and we can get into. I see let me grab a couple of these questions. Let me grab a few of these. Here we go. So let me go down. Some of these are a little bit further along. Now per Del Rey asks, Identity Server is going to stop being supported in 2022. Is there any alternative to it? There is an open source version. Identity Server is one of the services that you can use. It was a free and open source option. That's been used for years and years with ASP.NET Core to store and manage and handle authentication. They've decided to take it closed source, a paid service. It's not so much going to be not supported. There's an open source version that they're not making anymore. So that's something that that we'll see what happens. That's a little bit further out. But it's available out there that folks can use. Anything, an alternative, I don't have one right now, but there's tons of services out there you can hook up to, including Microsoft Azure. GatherPL asks, these options, can they be modified at runtime? So the options up here in configuring, no, these are configured at compile time, which makes sense. You don't want these things to change on the fly as somebody's interacting with the application. You want to set these as a policy, as a standard in your application, so that they are in place going forward. Question here from Ayu Sharma. How's it going there? Let's answer this one. Does the HTTP cookie stay when it is expired? The browser doesn't clean up cookies, right? That's more of a browser concern. The browser doesn't clean up cookies when they're marked as expired. When you go back to the website and the website requests the cookie, if the cookie is expired, it will remove it from the browser at that point. So there's right, it's something that the browser manages, and I think I remember that it removes it when you go back to the website. Otherwise, it just kind of lurk and hang around in there. I'm going to grab High Tech K's question there and answer that in a second here as I go through the list. Noun per Del Rey says, I did read a bit about Azure B2C. Can it handle the same as Identity Server 4? Yes. It is. It does have all the same features that you can interact with as far as setting up user authentication, issuing JSON web tokens, all that stuff you can do with the Azure B2C service. How can I use identity, Timebender asks, without using the default ASP.NET tables? I'd like to use my own user table with its own columns and don't require any other ASP.NET tables. Is this possible? I was just looking at, there is an article here, custom storage providers for identity. So, right, perhaps you want to use another data store. Your database tables have a different structure. There's definition as to how this is structured, but there are interfaces that you can implement. There we go. Optional interfaces. And there are other classes that you can build and deploy in order to make it customized, interact with whatever service you want to interact with. And there's the page if you want to customize this and have it structured, call it whatever you'd like. That'll get you the configuration that you need. And there's some nice samples here for how to go through and interact with this. So, all right. What else do we have here? Go back to here. All right. Yes, you can override the table names, but I think they were looking for a little bit more around, well, I'd like to do more as far as the structure of that. So High Tech K asked, I'm not sure if I missed the explanation, but why do we have to explicitly say which characters are allowed in the options object? Fine question. You know what? I wasn't too clear about that. Let me go back and show that. You don't need to specify the characters that are allowed. I added this here so that you could see that this option is available. So if you do want to constrain the characters allowed, right, these are all default settings that I've included here. You could certainly omit this and it'll work fine with this default. If you want to only include, say, just lowercase characters, well, that's fine. I can get rid of them, and it's just those lowercase characters. Whatever you need for your application, you can configure here. But like I said, these are just defaults that I included so that you could see it. None of these options are required, but this is the default settings. Okay? Good question. Thank you so much. Let me... Timebender asks, is cookie authentication safe and secure and usable in a production app? Yes, absolutely. Your cookies will be managed, handled appropriately. We strongly encourage you to deploy your production apps with transport layer security, SSL, HTTPS prefix on all of the requests so that the cookies and all of the contents of the request are encrypted and sent encrypted both by the browser and encrypted again by the server appropriately. So that entire communication cycle is encrypted and folks can't tamper with it in the scope of a request. So if it's being sent clear text, it's actually not too hard to inject stuff in there. Things like hosting providers, network providers, injecting panels on the top of screens. Oh, you're going to google.com, you're going to bing.com, I'm going to inject my own search index advertisements over top of that page because you're using my network service. You add the SSL connection in there and they can't inject content over top of it. So so Nerdherder asks, can identity be used in conjunction with something like Azure B2C or completely separate? Absolutely. You can integrate this with Azure B2C, with external login providers, all of those things to configure and connect in those other providers. They're provided in the documentation. If I covered all of those connections, like I said, it's a several week topic to get through, and there's other shows like the 425 show that do that very nicely. So I'll hand off to that. Quacksage asks, will I demo linking external accounts like, I think you meant GitHub. GitHub is where the tasty recipes are stored securely and they're tracked over time so that we can see who decided to put lemon in my chocolate chip cookie recipe. We can track that because it's source controlled on GitHub. No. Thank you, Quacksage, for the question. So I wasn't planning to show that, but there are where'd it go? There are instructions over here if you want to integrate with one of those other services. So let me grab Microsoft, and you go, there's a configuration you have to do on their service. You create you get a client ID and a secret in order to log in, and it's really easy to just say add Microsoft account, attach the client ID and secret, and it will pop up the provider on the identity screen. There are, let me see, does it have a link to the other providers? Because there is a great website for OAuth providers, and it's got here we go, AspNet Contrib, AspNet Security OAuth providers, and this one has, come on, show me, there we go. This has a link to NuGet packages that will allow you to authenticate with tons of other services. Yeah, Nullforce. I think we're on the same page here. So if we scroll down, like, I mean, you can log in with DeviantArt if you want. You want to log in with Discord. There's GitHub. So if we want folks to be able to log in with GitHub, create an OAuth app under your personal account, and it gives you a key and secret. And is it going to show me? And there's appropriately, let's go to that NuGet. I'm not going to go all the way through configuring here, right? Yeah, package reference. If I wanted to add GitHub, I'll go down into here, I'll add that package reference, just paste it in, and it will install that behind the scenes for me. Yes, go ahead, restore. And there we go. So now what I should be able to do is go back over here, and where it was, right, if we go back over to this external definition, so after add authentication, up in, I don't see it. I don't see it. services, add, spell it right, Fritz, authentication. We should be able to just say, there it is, add GitHub. And it wants some configuration, right? Config, and here we go. So I would have a client ID equals something, config, client secret equals something else. And just by adding that library and adding this add statement, if I go back over to this, yeah, I know I didn't. Something else. Just to put something in there. I know it's not correct, it's not going to actually authenticate, but now I have an external logins feature that's available, and all it's doing is generating a little button with that service provider there. So, I mean, this is really cool because you've got this nice collection of all these different providers. So some of us are here watching on Twitch. I can go grab the Twitch NuGet, and we can add the ability for folks to log in watching on Twitch. Paste that in. Heck, let's grab YouTube while I'm here. Right, let's back up one. Right, is YouTube here? YouTube is actually Google. Oh, which is one of the things. It's already kind of in the box. So I've got this added here. Go ahead, restore. Back over to this. So I added GitHub. I mean, you can add a bunch of these here, right? Why didn't I get Google? Google. I think there's... Where's the package? Microsoft, ASP.NET Core, Authentication, Google. Right. So let's do .NET. I'll do it this way. .NET add package, paste, and why didn't that work? Oh, source. Get into the actual web app project, and now add the package. There we go. You need to actually add the package inside a project. So now I can add Google, and right now I can log in with my YouTube ID. Right, and it's the same thing. Config, client ID equals, right, client secret equals something else, right? But now I added that NuGet package for Twitch, so now add Twitch is available. And I have the exact same configuration options. So I've just added these things here, and if I go back over to this after it's done rebuilding, now you see it updated, and I have those options. If I did have my appropriate proper client ID and secret, those would allow me to log in and get the same access into my application as this user. So we've crossed the authentication. All right, I'm logged in as CSharpFritz on Twitch, but I'm Jeff at jeffreyfritz.com inside this application, where I have those features and that access granted to me. So let me grab that link for you for those external providers, because I think this is an incredibly valuable resource that folks in the community have put together. So there's the link to that. I'm going to add that to the notes to make sure that you see that link. Particularly if you're watching the YouTube video, it's in the link in the description just below. So I agree, QuackSage. You know what? You are spot on there. Having these types of logins are so valuable for community projects. Right on, right? If I'm building an application that provides value, that provides insights into GitHub projects, you want to log in with your GitHub account to my application that's going to generate burn down charts or whatever from your GitHub projects. So you're right. I want to have folks log in with their GitHub account to my application. This is very valuable as you build those sidecar features onto some of these services. And it also provides folks a way to say, I'm not creating another user ID and password for your website. Let me just log in with my GitHub account or my Discord account or whatever account that it is, LinkedIn, whatever it might be. So Robert Deanho asks, what is stored in the database tables for a user when using an external authentication service? So if we go back over here, it's the user tokens. So for your user ID, it'll specify the login provider, GitHub, Twitch, Google, in the case of the 3 that I added here, the name of that token and the value that they sent, right? It's that one-time token that has this service connected to theirs so that it can verify that, yes, you are logged in. So, yeah, those third-party sites, they manage authentication much better than we do here, right? If something happens to my database, I'm done. But relying on one of those other services that manages and scales that very well, that's fine. I don't need to maintain that information. I don't need to deal with it. It's right here. Now, we had some questions about two-factor authentication, so check this out. Let me go back over to... Hey, where's my website? Back over to my website. Here it is. So there's a two-factor authentication link here. You can remove this if you don't want to add this to your application. But let's say you do. By default, it has this button here with, well, here's how users will configure this. But there's also the enable QR code generation link you can click through here that will give you some code to add. So you get the QR code and you can do the interaction and enable two-factor authentication. So there is a JavaScript library that's available out here that we can download. Cross-browser QR code for JavaScript. I'm just going to grab the zip file here, open it up, and jump into here. Right, all this stuff in here. I'm just going to grab QR code min.js and jump back into here. Go into where to go? Root. JavaScript, and I'm going to. Oh, I don't have it, do I? I dropped it because I closed the file. Do that again. Do that again. QR code min. Back over to here. Find in folder. No, I didn't want to find in folder. I want to open Explorer. There it is. Right, root JS. Just paste that in there. There it is. And we can add the QR code now by just adding this on the enable authenticator CSHTML file. Right, do I have that? I think I have that. I thought I enabled it. Oh no, I didn't scaffold it. Alright, well let's scaffold enable authenticator CSHTML. So, yeah. Okay, come on. I can specify the names of pages that we want to generate. There's all kinds of definitions here as to how to generate the various elements that you want to paint on the screen. So you pull them out. I just want files. Grab this. Okay, I'm going to paste that in. No, I didn't want to do that. I didn't think it was going to run it right away. Yeah, I know you're going to build. Come on. All right. I want... What's the name of the page that we want for QR code? It is Account Manage Enable Authenticator. So let's grab that. I'm going to just paste that, and I believe these just get separated with periods. There we go. It's the wrong data context, but I'll fix it. So this file by default is sitting inside that Razor class library, so we have to pull it out so we can modify it. And yeah, that doesn't exist. It should be application DB context. I think that's what I want. Waiting. Question here from Dillinger6360 while we're waiting for this, and nope, that didn't work. Dillinger asks, I have a project that I made in ASP.NET Core, and it was made with individual user accounts. Is it possible to change it to Windows authentication? Yes. And there are instructions in. I'm gonna have to hand you off to the documentation. There are instructions over there for how to do it. It's a little bit deeper than I want to go today, but it's always possible to shift back and forth between those different providers. I believe, right, first off, you got to run on IIS. You need to turn on Windows authentication, and I believe there's something that needs to go in startup for that. Negotiate defaults, is that all it is? Enable LDAP, that's, I think, for Kerberos. Okay. Yeah. So you can change it over in here. Impersonation if you need to. So this article will get you there. But that was something that I knew I had seen before. Enable Authenticator. No. It's not here. It's not telling me the file to create. I want... Well, if I run this, it'll list everything that's available. And we should be able to go find that two-factor page. You're kidding, right? LF, list files. Show me the files. You're welcome, Dillinger. I am not using Cosmos DB in my projects over on my channel. I needed relational database interactions. Wow. Build failed. Oh, it's because it's running over here is why. See if that'll work now. Since I had it running in the background. So I wonder if that was what was causing me issues here. Yeah, there it goes. Use force to overwrite. Sure. You can rewrite the manage nav. Any advice for a future career started in IT? Always be learning. Always, always be learning. It's good to learn and have. It's good to learn and have some base knowledge, but ask questions. Be humble about the questions that you're asking at work and figuring out, well, what's next? What are the next things that I need to do? Yeah, it generated another one of those. I didn't need that. And manage nav, it overwrote. I have a feeling. Yeah, this needs to be the other user. Good. So enable Authenticator is over here. This is the Authenticator app. We need to add in the ability for it to grab that little bit of JavaScript. So locate the scripts at the end of the file, and we're going to add in this at the bottom. See, so it's validating data, and if I add this, now I'll get that QR code. It's not in lib. I put it in JS, and I put the min version there. Where did I've got too many browsers open. How did we do? Is this built properly? Still got an error code. Identity hosting startup. Identity hosting startup is... Get rid of this. Because I've already got things configured in startup. There we go. So now if I go back into my user profile, two-factor authentication, now I get set up Authenticator app. Is this referring to the other identity user? Probably is. And I just didn't configure it. Yep. You can specify the user object when you scaffold. I didn't. Bad Fritz. Good. That should have taken care of that. Enable Authenticator 126. It's referring to it somewhere down here. This should be... There we go. And you can see how it's generating the QR code URI. There we go. Refresh. Now I get the QR code, and you get the key to set up the Authenticator app. So there's Authenticator apps out there for... There's a Microsoft one, there's LastPass, there's Google, but this will provide your two-factor authentication. So if I were to scan this and key in the number that my phone generates, we'd be able to log in here. So let me do this. I'm going to open my Authenticator. I'm going to click plus here. No, wrong one. Hang on. Select other, and I'll scan that QR code on screen. And of course it wants me to rate the app. But now I get a thing at the bottom that says web app 1 and my username, jeff@jeffreyfritz.com. I'll key in the two-factor number that it's generating right now. And now my Authenticator app has been verified. And this is all built for you. This is all free and in the framework. And you have these recovery codes available to you. But now, next time I log in, right, I can log in with my account. And it's going to ask me for my two-factor authenticator code before it lets me in. So I'll key in the new number and sure, remember this machine. And I'm in. And this is now has me authenticated. Got about a half hour left. I want to make sure I get to authorization. So, just taking a look here. All right. So, I'm logged in. But how do I know that I'm a administrator or other claims and get access to areas of this website. Like, I know there's a secret page over here that I can get to because, right, and actually, I think anybody can get to the secret page. If they just key in secret, they can get to the secret page. Well, that's not good. We should require you to be logged in to get to the secret page. Well, how do we do that? So this is where we're going to step into authorization. So authorization is, are you allowed to do these things? We've configured all these things to get you securely logged in. Let's talk about authorization now. How do we say, yes, you're allowed to do this? So my secret page is over here, right? This is a secret page. We're very high tech here, very high tech. And I've got a page model that lives behind the scenes here. The quick and dirty way to take any page and say, or MVC action, and say you need to be logged in to access this thing, is to use an authorize attribute. And this adds a security filter into the stream that says we need to check and make sure there's a logged in user to get here. There's one other piece you need to configure. You need to add authorization into the application. And in fact, I'm going to comment this out. We're going to talk about policy in just a second. So just by saying add authorization and adding that authorize tag, now look at that. If I try and go to /secret, I can't get there. It throws me to the login page and says, you need to log in to access this. So I will log back in. And I didn't need my two-factor authentication because I already checked the box that said, remember this machine. So I don't need to reconfigure that. And now I'm in the secret page because I'm logged in. Okay. Great. I'm here. I can do those interactions. But some things that you should know is this authorize attribute, while it's convenient for the one-off to be able to put this on individual pages and say, well, this is authorized, you can put this all in one place inside the startup class. So I'm going to remove this from here, and I'm going to go back over to startup, and down here where I have add razor pages, I can say options, and I can say options dot, let me go find my notes, make sure I get this right. There we go. So conventions, the conventions for razor pages, I can now say authorize a folder, authorize a page, an area page, or other folders, other pages. So I want to say authorize that individual page at /secret. You need to be logged in to access this page. The benefit of this is I've got this now sitting in a file outside of that page. The folks that are working on that page, they don't have to worry about checking to make sure that they don't break any of the security interaction. It's here. Further, I could put a series of these options statements, move them out, move this configuration out into another file that's off to the side. Maybe it only gets combined in when we deploy out to production, or right, it's in a file that my security officer maintains, and they're the ones reviewing and making sure that all of these pages are managed and handled appropriately. Is that, I'm not sure. Is that Don Stefan? Is that how you pronounce that? Is it possible to authorize methods on pages in this option statement? No. It's because we're in Razor Pages. Razor Pages is a page-centric thing. You either are on the page or you're not. So, right, at that point, right, there's other things that we can do to, right, if we look at, right, if I just go into the auth things, you see the 4 that we have. But Quacksage, there you go. There's, and Nerd Herder kind of kind of ticking onto things here. Can you apply this to all pages? And QuackSage actually going just one step further and saying, can we do this backwards, opening access to only certain pages? Yes. So, right, what we could do, right, is we could say authorize folder and put it right at the root. But then we can say options, conventions, and we can say allow anonymous, right? And, right, we can allow anonymous to the index page, right? Index? Yeah. And also to the privacy page. And if I did that right, it should effectively give me that type of configuration. So there I am. Oh, I'm still logged in. Log out. Yep, logged out. So I'm allowed into there. I'm allowed into there. And if I try and go to secret, now I'm blocked out. So you've, like was suggested, you can control and push this authorization around as need be. That's right, we're allowing anonymous in. They're gonna hack the anonymous folks. There we go. Log back in. Now, what about roles and claims? So, right, maybe there's a role is really just a string that you associate, a name for a group of users. So we can add roles to our application by here. I think I already have the statement up here. Yeah, there it is. So besides adding default identity, I added an identity role. An identity role is just a name with some sort of an ID. We don't really care about it. It's just a name so that we, in our code, can recognize, oh, these are administrators, these are managers, whatever it might be. So I wrote a little method down here to configure roles for my users. And, and if I go down here, so this is just so I can initialize, but there is an object here called role manager. And I want to make sure that we have an administrator role. This might be something that you do at configuration time or something you write into the database. Or maybe you have a user interface that allows you to use the role manager to create roles in your application. If the administrator role doesn't exist, let's go create a new identity role. See, it's kind of lame. All it has is a name. And create that role in the database. This knows how to go out to the store and save that. Authorization features like this are things that are stored inside your application or are being passed to you by a provider like Azure B2C, like Windows Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. But for things where we're authenticating somewhere else and we're just you're logged in, we can associate users to roles, to claims, using this type of configuration. So I have the administrator role. I'm going to grab what's called a user manager, and there's the type of my user, my custom user. I'm going to go find Jeff inside there. And if they're not in the administrator role, we'll go add them to the administrator role. So once Jeff is in the administrator role, it's rebuilding here behind the scenes for me. Once Jeff is in the administrator role, I have to log out and log back in, but, and I'll kick that here, if we look at ASP.NET roles now, you see there's an administrator role written to the database, and if I look at ASP.NET user roles, I can see, and it's obfuscated, it's not secure, but it's just the IDs being connected to each other, that it's stored that relationship in the database. You have to log out and log back in order for roles or claims to be associated with you. So I'll log back in now. And Now, I'm still on my secret page because I'm logged in. But if I want to restrict that to only folks who belong to a certain role, I can go up here and we can define what are called policies. Now, you can technically add and say, well, they must belong to this role. Sure. But a policy is much more flexible. It adds that extra level of abstraction where we can define a policy with a nice human-friendly name, admin only, and inside our policy we can require roles, we can require claims, we can require various interactions, we can require not just the presence of claims, but we can also inspect them. All kinds of things we can do to make sure that we apply the policy appropriate for whatever location it is that you need to work with. So let me go back over to that database, and I'm going to take myself out of that role. Okay. I'm going to leave this admin only policy in here, and let's turn this back around. Let's make this change this up a little bit, and we're going to say authorize page, and let's authorize the secret page. And I can provide as a second argument here the name of the policy that we want to enforce. Spell it right. I've gotten into the habit of taking some of these strings and turning these into constants that I pass around so that I never misspell things. So, back over to the database, write those changes. And I'm still able to see this, but if I log out, log back in. Come on, type it right, Jeff. So now I'm logged in, and if I try and get to secret now, I get access denied. You're logged in, but you aren't allowed to access this page. You don't have authorization to get to it. Okay? So we can get an access denied, and there are other, there is definition of this page sitting on disk that you can go in, you can edit, make it look like however you'd like. I didn't generate it, I didn't scaffold this file, but it's in that Razor page class library that you can scaffold. So, okay, so if I, where the heck did that come from? Let me, can I refresh this? Yeah. So if I go back and restart the application, because I have it re-adding me to the role every time it starts up, we'll get re-added to the role, we'll log out, we'll log back in. So that should have re-added me. And I'm in, and if I go back to secret, now I can get in because I have that role, right? So can I just, yeah, there. So now I have the role granted to me in the database. So you'll be able to manage and deliver these capabilities directly from some sort of a user interface if you want to have that runtime interaction for those. Okay, I talked a little bit about claims. Let's get into what claims are. Let's actually show that here. Wrong button. So claims are a series of properties associated with users or roles that are security significant. So we talked earlier about hair color as something that might be a property of a user that a salon website, right, will want to manage, right? My barber wants to know hair color. So he, right, for whatever reason. So their website, when you log in as a user, that's a piece of user important information that follows your user record. But a claim is that security important piece of information that I need to know. So I'm going to go back down here to my little create roles method. I'm going to create a claim, and a claim is just a pair of strings. Some of these claims are actually standardized in name, but you can create custom secure information, like in this case, I'm going to create one called location, because maybe in my application, let's conjure a scenario here where the location of what office you work out of, what region you're working in, is only allowed to access data in that region. So I'm in the Philadelphia location. I'm not allowed to access data, let's say, in the Montreal or Ottawa locations. They're Canadian. I'm in the States. I'm in Philadelphia. I can access American location information. So I'm going to associate this location with my user here. So I create a new claim object with whatever the string name is in Philadelphia, and I'm going to add that here. And this is something that you can certainly configure and run at runtime in your own screens here inside the application, or they may be configured and delivered to you by an LDAP server, by Active Directory server. But for these purposes, and showing just that, hey, we can inspect these claims, here it is. And Don Stefan, of course, for security purposes, it's very important that you know they only cut blonde hair. Well done. So I've added, next time this restarts, and it's actually already restarted behind the scenes, I've got this one. I've got this location information configured for my user, and if I drop back into my database and we look at user claims, browse to this, you see here's my user ID, the claim, it's just a string, Philadelphia. And I can inspect that, not just not just that thing exists, right? But I can add another policy, and we can call this American region, right? And not just require role, but I can say policy require claim, and I can inspect and say, well, does this claim exist, and does it have one of these values, right? Actually, I think that was require assertion, and you can check for the presence of a claim. But I'm going to require location, and I get a collection of string values that I can say, well, these are all valid. So Philadelphia, Boston, here we go, Baltimore, that's the way we say that around here, these parts, Atlanta, we're not going to let those punks in New York City or DC get in. Kidding. What did I do here? I ended something that I shouldn't have. There we go. Save that, let it rebuild. So now I can go through and I can enforce, well, you must be in an American region in order to access certain things, right? Or, right, we can set up, right, Canadian, right? And I mentioned Montreal, Toronto. I'm not going to spell Ottawa right, am I? There we go. All right. So I can go back here and I can say, well, that secret page, well, that's only for Canadians. Let that rebuild. And now I get access denied because I'm in an American region and only Canadians are allowed to access this region. So you have a lot of flexibility here with how you build these policies and how you can pass them around to the various parts of your application. One thing that I did, let me change this. I'll take this back to American. We can actually look at all the claims that are available on a user with a little for loop here. The user object is available on all of your Razor pages. It's also made available inside your MVC actions. But you do need to inject an authorization service. Rats. I'm sorry. Wrong sample code. We're going to look at you in a minute. Come here. I want to look at the claims. So the user object is available on every page, like I mentioned, and it has a claims collection. So I can just go through, and the claim type, it's a string. It's that label, and the value, that's another string. So if I save that, this will refresh, and we'll see all the claims that are associated with my user just for logging in. I have to go back to the page. You fool! Log out, log back in. There we go. Got about 10 minutes to go here. Plenty of time. So now, check out all the... These are some of the standard claims that are granted by default. My name identifier, the GUID that belongs and you can pass around to refer to me, right? My name that's stored, the email address, these come by default. And there's my custom one that I created, location. The role that's associated, right? That's a standard role, is a standard claim. And there it is, administrator. So I forget what AMR is. So, okay. That's interesting. That's pretty cool that these things are available so that we can inspect and tinker with this. Ancient Coder, that's a good question. Let me bring that up. Is the name identifier the user ID? This DAE 865. Let's go take a look in the database, see if that matches up. Yes, it is. That is the user ID over here inside this table. So that does match up if you pass that claim around. So, okay, cool. I get it. Now, the last piece that I started to show there, the last sample that I grabbed by accident, is what if there's parts of this page that we want to hide if you don't have high enough access, right? You've got secret access, but you don't have top secret access. Maybe you're on double secret probation and you're not allowed to see some of this stuff. So I forgot these using statements that I'm going to drop in here. So I'm going to bring in the authorization capabilities. I'm going to bring in what's called an authorization service. The service that knows how to authorize things. And I'm going to check the user and see if you're in this policy name. So let's go back over here to startup and let's have this. Let's call this Boston only. All right, and we'll create a policy called Boston only. And I think you can see this area in your startup class is going to get a little out of control if you have a bunch of different policies defined. And I like to think that this is exactly the type of thing that I want to move out into another class file so that it's loaded here and that other class file is isolated and only appropriate folks change that. So let's change this and say that, right, the Boston only passes if you have Boston as your location. So yeah, no policy found. Yeah, I know, I just made it. There it is. So this is my secret page, there's my claims, and because I'm not in Boston, I'm in Philadelphia, I don't get that extra section here. Let me go back over, and if we change this policy, I'll leave it with the same name, but I'll add Philadelphia into the mix because I'm in Philadelphia. Let that rebuild, refresh, and it should reload here in just a second. There it is. Because I fulfilled, and you saw it just appear there because it's checking for that Boston only policy, and now Boston and Philadelphia both pass. So we're good. Now, Dukasov asked the question, I've been hinting at this, and maybe I should show this real quick. How would you go about moving that policy config to another file? Let's do it. That's not too hard to do at all. Let's make that happen. I'm going to collapse up some of these because it makes my file explorer here look like an unmade bed. Let's add another one here, and let's call this, let's just call this policy.cs. And I'll put a namespace in here, and my namespace, this is web app 1. Sure, that's fine. And I'm going to create this will be a static class, and I'll call this just policy. So let's create a method here, public static void, configure policy, and I think I need to pass something into this. So let's go back over to startup. Yeah, I want to pass options, which are authorization options. Microsoft, ASP.NET Core, authorization, options. And I'm actually going to shorten this, control dot, get my using statement. There we go. Now I can just take all of this, drop it right there, and I can just say, spell it right, Fritz, configure policy. And now it's over here. All the same things, and now it's in a file that will work properly. Should be webapp1.policy. I've confused it. Let's see, that should rebuild properly. No, why don't you like that? Does not exist in the namespace webapp1. Yes, it does. I didn't save it. I didn't save the file. Son of a gun. I need your help with that. So, nope, I still don't have it right. Start up line 55. Yeah, that's the thing. Alright, let's rename this then, to make it a little bit clearer. I'm going to call this my policy. I forgot the M. No, it should pass the options automatically. Typer namespace name my policy doesn't exist in the namespace. I forgot to save. I'm having a real hard time with this save thing. Can you tell that? Can you tell? How's it going, Curious Drive? Good to see you. Oh, why doesn't it like it? Public static class, my policy. Right? Even if I do that, should find it and rebuild properly. Why am I not getting it finding that file? That's... oh, wrong key. You should be able to have it pass. I'm checking my compiler here to the side. No! The typer namespace my policy doesn't exist. Are you kidding? It's right there. Public class my policy. And it's in the namespace web app 1. It's in dub root. Oh my gosh! It wasn't compiling. Oh my gosh. Thank you. So, right, I'm passing a pointer to this. That should work. Wow! Nice catch. Ooh. There we go. So now it's in a folder, and right, my application is working just fine, and I'm able to tinker with that. We are just about out of time here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. If you're over there on Learn TV, thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you joining us. It's been great to have you with us here today, and I will see you next time. If you're watching on the YouTube, make sure you check out the other videos in the series here. We covered a lot in this. There's links and definitions just below me here in the description, and there's going to be links to the previous video and the playlist, the full CSharpFritz playlist right here. Click through, check it out. You won't be disappointed. Have a great time, and I will see you next time on YouTube.